children. I mean, even Jonathan Edwards talked about how his mother was the most influential influence in his Christianity.
Yeah.
And so it's just really important that moms are just as equipped as a pastor or even teenage girls. When I got into this, I was 19. And it's because I was also going to a secular college at the same time, and I was being challenged in my astronomy class that Christianity wasn't true. And so it's really important that Christians understand that apologetics, not only is it effective for evangelism and being able to explain to the non-believer why Christianity is true, it's also important for us as believers. It builds our confidence. And if you do go through a faith crisis, like so many are, deconstructing their faith these days, but apologetics maybe can't save somebody, right? The Holy Spirit has to do that, but it can't save your faith, because in a lot of times you get challenged, and unless you have that foundation of evidence and truth, you can easily get swayed away from your faith. So it really is important for every believer to be an apologist, not just pastors and theologians,
right?
Like that.
And male, female, young and old, and certainly this is something that is, as you mentioned, there are those that are going off to school and getting challenged, going off to college, getting challenged, and I don't have an answer, and so they will shirk back in their thoughts on things and don't know where to turn, and as a result, many of them are converted over into a secular worldview and are running away from their faith. Right.
Yeah, and I've seen it happen to so many of my friends. I mean, I grew up in a very strong youth group, a very strong church, and I've seen friends who I never thought would walk away, and they've just decided it's not for them anymore, and they don't have that strong foundation, and they've been swayed away, and it's hard to watch, and you pray for them, but it's really important that we, especially me as a mother, my son's 17 and a half, he's going to be heading off to college in a few years or whenever he decides to. And if that happens, I don't want him to be swayed away. I want him to have that biblical foundation. So, he's had to go through my book
Sure.
and he's had to be taught, those things about why Christianity is true.
So what are some obstacles that you have found for individuals not being a defender of the faith?
So it's funny because I always invite my friends to things I speak on, and, they never really come, but then I'm the first one that they call or text when they come up against an issue. So, for example, like I have a friend who said, Jehovah's Witnesses came to my door, or Mormons came to my door, and I had no idea what to say. And my kids were there, and then they were like, well, how are they different from us? Because they said they were a Christian, and I didn't know how to answer them. And so then they come to me and they say, what do I say? Or I have friends with kids in school, and they're like, my child came home, they're 9 years old, and they said, well, my friend said that God doesn't exist, and how do I answer that? And so, it's funny because a lot of people don't realize the need, or a lot of Christians don't realize their need for apologetics until an issue like that comes up. And then they realize, I really should know these things. And so a lot of it is coming from their children. Their kids are coming up against arguments at school, things like that in college. And then also, they're showing up at your doorstep and they're asking, or they're saying they're Christians just like you, but what does that mean? And so I think that's really where the average person is kind of coming up against it on a regular basis. Also, if you're a Christian who feels like you want to evangelize or you want to, share somebody the gospel or whatever, then, you're starting to get some of these challenges too. People are like, well, how do you know even the Bible's true? Like, why should I go to your church if I don't believe it's true?
Right.
So I think it's in those kinds of cases where people are coming up against these issues.
We're talking with Sarah Enterline today, and you and Dr. Joseph Holden have recently written a visual guide to biblical apologetics. I mean, this is such a unique formatted book. It's so appealing for the reader. I mean, it engages the eye once you open the pages. But give us an overview of the book, if you would.
Yeah, so the book is basically every kind of apologetic issue you could think of that we're dealing with in culture today. So it's not just, we have what is apologetics, and then we also have the basics of Christianity, God, Jesus, the Bible, where we give cases for those things. But we also talk about how is the Bible and biblical Christianity different from other worldviews? How is Christianity different from LDS or Jehovah's Witnesses? Or how is Christianity different from Islam? Do they worship the same God? Things like that. But also we have answering culture in apologetics. So we talk about abortion, we talk about obeying the government, we talk about whether war is just. And we also talk about science. So if you have people who are scientists in your life or are very interested in science, and they say, the Bible and evolution aren't compatible, or the Bible isn't scientifically accurate, we also answer some of those things. And then obviously we do give the gospel, and we explain about eternity and how you can spend eternity with Jesus. So it's really a robust, full-case book in a lot of ways. Of course, we can't go into a lot of detail on any specific issue,
right.
But we do give enough, I feel like, to give you a solid enough answer to where you can maybe do further research yourself if you'd like to, but it does give you confidence that there is an answer to be found. You may just have to do a little bit more research to build that case.
And friends, it's a visual guide. I mean, it's lots of charts and graphs and tables that really, again, it's very eye appealing, and you can look at the topic and it's laid out in such a fashion that it's just not, it doesn't read through like a textbook as such, though it is a textbook, in that it really guides the reader. So it's laid out in such a way that you can look at that topic and just see the main bullet points laid out in such an easy to read fashion that it really guides the reader in a powerful way.
Yes, and it's, as a teacher, I've taught for 12 years, very young age, 6th grade through all the way through high school. And with kids, what I noticed is I actually changed up a lot of my curriculum from a lot of text to charts and visuals and pictures, and it resonated so much more with the kids. When you break things up into smaller chunks and then you put them in a way that's visually appealing, or in a timeline where they can see like, oh, there's a logical progression to this thought or something like that. So I really do love the way it is laid out, because I do feel like a lot of people can get overwhelmed by these huge, textbooks, these huge apologetic tomes that come out, these giant books. Right. And it's all text, and you can get overwhelmed by that. And so I feel like this is a really great way of kind of being able to not be overwhelmed by the information, but like you said, it's visually appealing, and it's going to appeal to not only visual learners, but also learners of all kinds.
Indeed. Friends, we'll tell you more about it and how you can obtain a copy of the book a little bit later. Stay with us. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, whatever happened to Halley's Comet?
Chris, Halley's Comet is what astronomers refer to as a short-term comet. It makes an orbit around the sun every 76 years. People saw it in the early 1900s and then again in the 80s. Astronomers can keep track of it through telescopes, and they've noticed it has decreased in size. Every trip around the sun causes the comet to disintegrate, with the tail of the comet being stripped away. Halley's Comet can't make very many trips around the sun without being totally destroyed. Thus, it couldn't be millions and millions of years old. It's a short-period comet. But there are a lot of short-period comets in the solar system. The solar system can't be billions of years old with all these youthful features in it. Chris, everything fits the recent creation idea that we're taught when we go back to Genesis.
For more information, you can find us on the web at www.icr.org.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. We're dealing with the topic of apologetics today, and a brand new visual guide to biblical apologetics book that's come out that has laid it out in a very easy to use format. It's a visual guide, just really one-of-a-kind resource on this topic. And we'll talk about some of the issues in the book. We're speaking with Sarah Enterline, who is a co-author of this book with Dr. Joseph Holden. He has appeared with us previous on Crosstalk. They've put this book together, a visual guide to biblical apologetics. And I know, Sarah, that there are a number of individuals in our society today, and you pointed out earlier, they just deny the existence of God. I mean, certainly this is a very foundational, fundamental issue, and one of your visual guides presents 5 ways to show God exists. I see it on page 25 in your book. Summarize that for us, if you would.
So my first argument on that page is that, if you just look around, everything that you see is an effect, right? You can look around, you can see, okay, this didn't just get here by accident. There has to be the logic is that everything in our world has to be invented or created or thought of by somebody before it can exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this case, you look around the world and you say, okay, well, where did everything come from? And if everything that exists is an effect, which it is, then what is that cause? And so it's just that general idea of cause and effect. If there's an effect, there has to be a cause to that effect. And so if we have all this material stuff in the world that we can touch, taste, feel, see, where did it come from? And so it has to have a cause. And so in the book, one of the things we say is that something can't come from nothing. Because if there is ever nothing, then nothing is all there would ever be. And it sounds a little Dr. Seuss-y, but it is true. It's that if there was ever nothing, then nothing is all that would ever exist. So there had to be something at the beginning, whatever it was, there had to be something. And so then we kind of build the case that something is what we call a first cause. And it has to be eternal in order to sustain non-eternal things. And we also have things like intelligent design, where if things have a design, that means they have a designer. And if you look at, the laws of nature, physics, these things, the world works in a very orderly fashion. It's not chaotic, the fact that we live in what we call the Goldilocks zone on Earth, that we are the perfect distance away from the sun to stay warm, but also not freeze to death. And then also not burn up. The fact that we live in this privileged planet with, the solar system that perfectly revolves around the sun and how it all works. You just look at the world and you're like, somebody with brains or intelligence that puts together this extremely intelligent and precise mathematical system in order for the world to be the way that it is. And a lot of atheists will say, oh, well, we had the Big Bang at the beginning, and I'm sure that there was an implosion of stuff. There was nothing, and then all of a sudden there was a bunch of stuff. And I do believe that's true, but I believe that the catalyst for that Big Bang was a creator with intelligence and design in mind, and he spoke it into existence. And so that's part of our case, is that if there's design, there has to be a designer.
Right.
When you look at, a chair, you don't think, oh, okay, that chair doesn't exist. You think, oh, there must have been somebody, or the chair just, magically just appeared.
Mm-hmm.
You think, oh, okay, somebody actually carved that chair and made it and created it. And so, and then we also have things like right and wrong. C.S. Lewis did a lot of work in this particular area where he talked about, everyone has this idea of like justice and fair play. Like, if you get mistreated, you say, hey, that's not fair. But, what standard are you appealing to when you say that's not fair? If you're not a Christian, then, you can't say, oh, there's inherently something right or wrong about the way that you're being treated. And a lot of atheists have to actually borrow from Christian ideals. Society has borrowed a lot, not just in America, but in other countries. They have borrowed a lot of morals and ideals from the Bible about how to create their laws and things like that. And then also religion. The fact that religion exists just shows us that there is something out there to be worshipped. Human beings have this desire to worship. Now, some people feel that need with like money or power, or they worship the wrong things, maybe each other. They worship or even self. We see that a lot in culture today. But they need to have this need to worship something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, why do these religions? Why did they even begin if there was nothing to worship in the first place? The first peoples had to see that there was something out there that deserved the worship that they were given. And then lastly, also, just I kind of alluded to this before, is the laws of physics. With inertia and these laws that we've discovered, things would not move if something didn't originally move them. And so you have this idea that things are at rest until something changes that. And so if there was never anything, then everything would still be the same as it was from the very beginning. And we see that nothing's not the same. Obviously, if there was ever nothing, something happened to where now there are things. And so that's kind of how we build our case. And that's really more of a general case for not necessarily the God of the Bible, but just a general case that there is some type of creator out there And then, from that point, you build the case for who that creator is.
Right. And there are many who will follow up with that. Okay, if that's really the case, then, Sarah, why then is there, this perfect God that's out there, this loving being, then why does he allow evil in this world? Why is, and why is there suffering? Why is there cancer in this world? It seems like an oxymoron.
Right. And you know what? That's something as a Christian, I definitely, as a mother, I struggle with that because I feel like when you become a mom, you kind of become a mom to all the world's children. And so when you see children in other countries and they're being hurt or they're hungry or, your heart just breaks and you just want to, you just want to be a mom to all the kids. It's like, Lord, how can you allow these things? If you're really there and you're a God of love, how do you allow these things? And I'm going to be honest, as a Christian, even as an apologist, even though I know Christianity is true, I struggle with why God does allow a lot of the things that he does. But really, it all comes down to, if God is truly a God of love and he's a God of justice, then he is not going to infringe upon your free will. He's going to let you make your choices, and he is not going to force you to be a God-loving robot. And so in that case, sometimes when you love somebody, you kind of have to let them go and you have to let them make their own choices. Because otherwise you'd be controlling them, and that's not true love, and God's not going to do that to us. And so we do know that, unfortunately, the free will choices of people in the world will affect other people, innocence, for example, and it's really hard. But and I do see God intervening. He does intervene so much. He prevents bad things from happening to people. I know that in my life, he has protected me multiple times. From various things. He's protected my children from multiple things. And so I think what it is, the question is not why doesn't he intervene, but why doesn't he intervene more? Because I do feel like he does. It's just maybe we don't always see it or we don't acknowledge the fact that he does. But really, I think it all comes down to a true loving God would not, overtake your free will. He's going to let you have your free will. And unfortunately, the effect of free will is that some people make bad choices, and those bad choices affect other people and innocence. But, really, the question is not why doesn't God do more, but why don't we do more? Why are we as Christians doing more? Why isn't the church doing more to fight the injustice worldwide? It all comes down to people. It's our responsibility. If this is our world, and God put us in charge of this world, and this is our dominion, as he told Adam, then why are we doing more, really? And so I don't feel like the blame should be put on God. I feel like the blame is on us. We're allowing these things to take place, and we shouldn't. So,
Sarah Ennerlein with us here today. You've got so many different graphs and charts, and you lay things out in an easy-to-read format. And I know that I'm looking at pages 42 to 48, and there are many worldviews, religions, cults, beliefs that conflict with the biblical worldview. And you've got some wonderful charts on this. Just tell us about these pages.
So when I started out, I actually started out teaching about different world religions. And, you get a lot of questions like, well, what about this religion? And what about this religion? What about this God? What about this book? And so finally, I just decided to put it kind of in a viewer-friendly chart for my world religion students. So that's where this came from. And it's really just comparing all the worldviews, especially you have these monotheistic worldviews like Christianity or Islam and Judaism, where a lot of people nowadays will say, oh, they all worship the same God. But that's actually not the case. We do have, Islam and Judaism, which maybe have different words for God. In Arabian countries, they speak Arabic. They use the word Allah for God. But Allah can now, once Muhammad came along, it can now refer to, the God of Islam, or it can refer to, just a general God, and it's just the word for God. And so we just have to be careful, and we have to ask people, yes, you worship one God, but what does that mean to you, right? What does that actually mean? And if you read the Quran and you read, what the word God actually means to them, it is not the God of biblical Christianity. It's a very different type of God. And so we're showing that. And one of the biggest differences is that Christians believe something called compound monotheism, whereas Muslims and Jews believe in absolute monotheism, which means that we believe that there is three persons in one God, multiple peoples, persons in one God, whereas they believe one God, one person. They deny Jesus and they deny the Holy Spirit. So that is a huge difference between those monotheistic religions. So those are just kind of some of the things we're showing, is that their views of God are very, very different. And if they all contradict each other, then they can't all be true. The laws of logic show that contradictory things cannot both be true at the same time. And so if that's the case, then it's really on the person searching for what the true God is to decide which one has the best evidence, which one has the best support, which one seems like it's the truth over the other ones, because they can't all be true.
Right, they can't. And so, friends, it's laid out in like a chart, so you can look across who is the founder of each of these religions,
right.
The date founded, the sacred writings, worldwide worldview classification, their view of Jesus, salvation, etc. And it's laid out: Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and Zoroastrianism, Sikhism, and it goes on: Jainism, Shinto, Marxism, secular humanism, and then you'll see some of the cults as well: Jehovah's Witnesses, the LDS, Christian Science, Scientology, and then you see the line goes all the way through, so you can compare them, and it really is just a wonderful, quick reference guide, even as to the views of these religions and how do they view Jesus, what do they think about salvation, and it's very clear, it's concise, it's easy to use. And just before the break, friends, I just want to make mention this visual guide to biblical apologetics. This is a hardcover 8.5 by 11 book. It normally retails for $26.99. However, it's been chosen as a book of the month at our VCY bookstore, and they've worked out a special arrangement with the publisher, and through May 31st, 2025, they are featuring this at 50% off, just $13.49, plus any applicable tax and or shipping. It's not only a great book for yourself, but think about your Bible study leader or teacher. It's a great graduation gift. Those of you who teach Sunday school, think of giving this as a gift to your graduating seniors or those going off to college. It's just a tremendous book, and 50% off through May 31st. And you can go to vcy.com, or you can reach our bookstore right now, 1-888-722-4829. That's 1-888-722-4829. 4829. It's called A Visual Guide to Biblical Apologetics. I don't care what your age group is, friends. You're going to find this visually appealing. You want to pick it up. You want to turn page after page after page. And in doing so, your learning is going to increase on these topics. We'll tell you more about it after the break. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY American Network.
There is a movement to propel humanity toward an advanced level of existence. Those seeking to change the culture of society are on a rapid trajectory, aggressively touting the extremely powerful capabilities of AI,
artificial intelligence, and transhumanism.
The ultimate goal of the elite is to obtain immortality and become gods. In the book, Artificial Intelligence, Transhumanism, and the De-Evolution of Democracy, pastor and Bible prophecy speaker Dr. Richard Schmidt unfolds his extensive research and documents revealing information unveiling the agenda of those pursuing this technology for evil. You'll also see how these technological advancements fit hand in glove with biblical prophecy and one known as Antichrist. The book, Artificial Intelligence, available for a donation of $18. Call 1-800-729-9829.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America, and again, just a wonderful visual guide here to this matter of apologetics, biblical apologetics. Sarah Enterline is with us today, co-author of the book, and available at half off, 50% off, through the end of this month, vcy.com, or by calling 1-888-722-4829. I think it's very interesting that I see so many articles coming out today criticizing those who believe, in the authority of the Scriptures, or they seem to belittle those who believe in this Bronze Age book. You've got some very intriguing, extensive writings and sections in your book as to how archaeology confirms the Scriptures. And to me, that was very fascinating to see through the years all of this archaeology that really confirms what we're reading is true. It's now been visually shown to be true.
Right. Yeah, no, there's so much. I mean, we really have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to archaeology and its evidence for Christianity. You know, a lot of people challenge the Bible and say, oh, it's not true. But really, we've never, ever found anything in archaeology or history that actually contradicts the Bible. So we do have quite a lot to support it.
Yeah. Name just a couple of things that have been found, or I guess even persons or their seals have been found to prove that these are actual people, events, places from the Scriptures themselves.
Yeah, so we actually have at least 60 Old Testament people verified and 30 in the New Testament, more than 115 sites in the Old Testament, 75 sites in the New Testament that have been found. You know, we have things like the Pontius Pilate inscription, where it literally says Pontius Pilate, the prefect of Judea, and that's super important because, you know, he is the one that was the prefect over the time when Jesus was alive, and he's the one who presided over the trial of Jesus, at least the Roman side. And so it's really important that we have things like that because the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus are really what Christianity hangs upon as a historically, you know, truthful religion. And the fact that we have something that proves Pontius Pilate not only did exist, but he was the person that the Bible said he was. And then we also have the James ossuary, where we have the bones of James. And on the box, it says, James, the son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. And so it shows that, you know, you even have Jesus's brother. Remember, Jesus of Nazareth was a real person with siblings. And so, you know, you even have the evidence that his brother was a real person. You know, there's so many. We have coins, and we have, you know, coins of Romans that show we have these emperors and these also Jewish kings that existed, like King Herod. And then we also have multiple things like just like things of the, like a Cyrus cylinder. Sorry, that's what I was trying to think of, which I've actually seen. I went and saw it at the British Museum, and it's incredible. It shows that, you know, we have this seal that shows that Cyrus really did declare, you know, these human rights, that just because people are prisoners does not mean that they don't deserve human rights just because they're underneath another culture, like the Jews were, you know, the slaves or the prisoners of war of Persia and all these other people, that they still deserve to be able to worship their own gods. Yeah. And so he allowed that. He sent them back to Israel to build their temple and to rebuild their cities. And the fact that we have that and we have it and it's dated to, you know, when it happened, and we can prove that, and that's in, you know, the book of Daniel and the book of Jeremiah, and it just shows that these passages in the Bible, they're not just fairy tales, they're not just written by people with active imaginations, like they are rooted in history. And then we also have these seals, like you were speaking of, that we have these, you know, seals where, like, you know, where royalty would seal letters or things like that, and we have their proof, their rings that would have that impression on them. And there are these people named in the Bible, all these kings, and there's 50 listed just in these 2 pages here. Yeah. And so there are so many different things that we have, and we have quite a few listed in the book in a very small amount of pages, but they're all there, and so and friends, there's just a plethora of information. And
friends, again, they're laid out so visually appealing, where you can see the name of the individual. Next to them is the scripture that their name is mentioned, when they were from, what century they were from, and then what was the artifact that was found to prove their existence. I mean, it's just remarkable to see this and other information. I'm going to have you turn as well to page 57 in your book, because I think this is also very important to get. We have many people who will doubt the authenticity of the Bible, while at the same time they don't have any problem, accepting Homer's Iliad or Julius Caesar's, the Gallic Wars. Yet the manuscripts available, the scriptures, so much closer to the dates of their original writing. And you put this out in just a wonderful chart that's easy to grasp. Tell us about that chart.
So this chart basically shows that the Bible not only has more manuscript evidence, but we also have earlier and better copied manuscript evidence than any other book from the ancient world. So if you compare the New Testament to any other book from the time of ancient Greece or the time of ancient Rome, and you look at, no one questions whether or not Julius Caesar existed. No one questions whether, Homer existed or Plato existed. Yet we have so few of their manuscripts. And not only do we have so few of their manuscripts were the first copy we have is hundreds of years after they died. So an example would be for Homer here, we have Iliad as a source of his existence. And the original was written in the 9th century BC, and then our earliest manuscript doesn't come until the 400s BC. So that's a gap of 450 years. Yeah. How do we know that it hasn't been changed? And Herodotus, who was a historian, he's listed next, he did an experiment kind of, and he basically said that it shows us that there is. It has to be 200 years, I think, or more than 200 years is where myth and legend creep in, right? So if it's under 200 years, the manuscript evidence is better than it was later. And so it just goes to show you that, the Bible, our manuscripts are within 30 to 50 years, which is when the eyewitnesses are still alive. And so they could have said, oh, that's not how it happened. They could have doubted them. They could have changed the story, and they didn't. And so that just goes to show you that, we can trust the Bible because we actually have eyewitnesses alive when the first manuscripts were circulating. And so they're accurate, whereas we don't have that with Homer and Plato. And then also with the Bible, we have, thousands and thousands and thousands of Greek manuscripts and other biblical manuscripts. It says at the bottom, total biblical manuscripts, we have about 67,000 plus in all languages, and that is way more than, for example, Homer, who has about 1950. So you're looking at 67,000 compared to 2,000, and he's really the closest one to us. As far as comparison, yet no one says, oh, Homer never existed, but they do say that about Jesus and Abraham and all these other biblical figures. Yet our manuscript evidence is so much better than theirs. Yeah,
and again, friends, you can see the author, the ancient source that they had written, the date of origin, the earliest manuscripts, the gap from when they were, written, or the gap from the original, and then the number of copies. And it's amazing to see how the Bible exceeds them all, yet it's the Bible that's under question today by many. But when you see this out, you can point out to others these things. Friends, let me open our phone lines. Maybe you have some questions about the things we've talked about or about apologetics as a whole or some specific area. Our phone number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. That's 800-733-9829. I guess my emphasis, though, is how this is so clear and concise and easy to use. And really, it's an introductory guide to apologetics and really gives that foundation for the faith. And this visual guide, just one of a kind resource to be of help to you. You have infographics, you've got charts, you've got tables. And again, rather than just reading text words, it's laid out so you can really grasp the truth. And I just commend you as for putting it together in such a way that is so eye appealing and the information is solid as to what the reader will find. Tell us how do you intend for this book to be utilized? How can people best use this book?
Well, what I would like to see is that if the average person has no introduction or no kind of experience with apologetics, I'd love to see it kind of be their first source. Just an introductory book for here. This is all the evidence that we have for Christianity, and you can trust that Christianity is true. And if they don't go beyond this book, I feel like they have enough to trust that what they believe is the truth. And so I would really like to see it be kind of an introductory textbook for Christians, for even baby Christians, and then even Christians who've been believers for a long time that occasionally struggle with those questions or being challenged by their friends and family. I would also love to see it being on hand when you have people come to your door, or when you have people challenge you on these specific issues. Just a really quick guide, be like, hey, like you're saying this about the Bible, but just flip through the page. Like, did you know that this? And just kind of pointing people to it, in evangelism. And then I'd also love to see it being used in schools. I'd love to see it being used in Bible classes.
Yeah.
In Sunday schools, I'd love to see youth pastors have it and children's ministry leaders have it. Just because I feel like because it is visually appealing and the way that it's laid out, you don't have to overwhelm kids with information. You can just give them pieces. And, and the thing is, kids are smart. They ask really good questions, and they will not only ask a good question, but they'll also ask the next question, the question that, the atheist is going to challenge you with. And so I feel like it's a great resource for just those quick conversations that you're going to be having with people about the beliefs of Christianity. So I'd love to see it in classrooms. I'd love to see it in Sunday schools. I'd love to see it in the church. I'd love to see it in all the places where Christians have questions and are going to be having these conversations, because I really do feel like all ages can use it. It's great for like I said, for older people who maybe don't want to read a textbook, I'm a visual learner, so it's great for me. I love the visual appealing nature of it, and then especially being able to use it to train our children in the way that they should go. So.
Yeah, and friends, it's a wonderful tool in all of those regards. We're going to pick up the first question right after the break because we're under a minute here. But let me just again mention the book that is available here, A Visual Guide to Apologetics, and so powerful in getting the truth of the Scriptures out and in an understandable way, and a great foundational book in this regard. And there's so many aspects of this book that we have not been able to discuss just due to time, but 10 major problems with evolution, responding to popular myths about science and faith. Does the fossil evidence support human evolution? 7 powerful evidence that show the universe was designed. On and on it goes. Again, it's available at vcy.com, or reach out to the bookstore, 1-888-722-4829. That's 1-888-722-4829. We're going to be back in just a minute here for the final segment. We'll take some of your calls. Our number to Crosstalk is 800-733-9829. That's 800-733-9829. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY American Network.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website's worldviewreport.com. Texas, tomorrow, Tuesday, May 20th, 2025, there are 4 faithful pastors, along with many civilian citizens, that are holding a rally at the Capitol. It's a Judeo-Christian rally. It's to counter the Islamist groups that are coming and taking over Texas. Texas has clearly been targeted. And the Islamic countries have billions of dollars to use the media, pad the pockets of politicians, and the budget shortfalls of counties and cities. Texas has clearly been targeted with compounds, Islamic compounds, mosque, schools. They're teaching, because we sent in an undercover former federal agent last week, they're teaching things like child marriage and waging war against the Christian and the Jews. If they can take down Texas, they can take down any state.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Our number today, 800-733-9829. 800-733-9829. And again, we're talking today with Sarah Interline, A Visual Guide to Biblical Apologetics. Let's go to the phones. We've got Todd calling in, Kenosha, Wisconsin. Todd, you're on the air. Hello, Todd.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Yeah, hey, Homer and Isaiah actually went to the same university and studied together. We proved it in the 90s with some skeptics.
Okay. Any word on that, Sarah? I mean,
that could probably that's very likely true. I mean, a lot of our biblical characters, I mean, they all interacted with lots of secular peoples. I mean, that could very well be true. I've never researched that myself, but it makes sense that might be the case. I mean, you have people like Alexander the Great being the student of like Aristotle, for example, and we know that there's tons of effects from Alexander the Great to even Jesus' time, and so that is probably totally true, but I've never researched that myself.
Great. Thank you for the call here, Todd. Let's go next to Warren calling in. Hi, Warren. You're on the air.
Yes, I wanted to know if you could give me the definition of Jesus Christ.
What is the definition of Jesus Christ?
Right.
Okay. Sarah, who is Jesus Christ?
Well, Christ is just another title for Messiah. So it's the idea that he is the Jewish Messiah, the Savior that is to come. And Jesus, obviously the word Yeshua means, Emmanuel, like God is with us, or God saves. And so Jesus Christ would be the God who saves and is also the promised Messiah of the Jews, and now ultimately the world, as we read in John 3:16. But if you're asking who the historical person Jesus Christ is, I would say that he is a real person who was God incarnate, was born sometime between 4 BC and 0 AD, and he died on the cross sometime between 30 and 33 AD, and he is the promised Messiah to come. He is the Savior of the world, and he saves us from our sins. And I do believe he was born in Bethlehem, and he was raised in Nazareth, and he died and he rose again.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Warren. Roger in Minnesota, you're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. I'm dealing with a guy on Facebook. I don't know what type of religion it is, but he says that everybody has Christ in them already. They just have to realize that. And I was wondering, what's the source for that?
So that is basically a cult of Christianity. It's basically the idea of autotheism, that we are self-gods. And you just need to realize that that's actually a New Age belief. So that comes from the New Age belief that we all have that spark of divinity in us, and we just need to realize it, and that eventually we can save ourselves by ascending and basically meditating and being self-aware and listening to our spirit guides. But it is really a New Age belief. It's autotheism, meaning self can become God. It's also pantheism, because they do believe that eventually we are absorbed into the all, that we tap into the divinity of all. But it's also a form of polytheism, that there are many little gods around. But it really is a form of New Age, and almost a type of, sometimes when they practice, they do practices of like Zen Buddhism. But it is a New Age belief.
Great.
Okay. Does he's Native American? Does that stem from the beliefs of the Native Americans?
Well, Native Americans typically have something where they do like ancestry worship or animism, where they believe that it's basically a pantheistic belief that there is spirits in all, and that God, that there is like a pervading spirit like Taoism, that there is one spirit that kind of inhabits all of nature and animals and people, and we're all connected. It really comes from Taoism, but there is forms of it in Native American religions, animism and pantheism. So yes, that would make sense.
Great.
Okay, thank you. I really will appreciate this, and I'm going to get the book, definitely.
Great. Yeah,
amazing.
Thank you for the call, and it lays out things so well. And again, it's not like a textbook that you just read chapter after chapter after chapter. Well, one thing I like about this, Sarah, is that you can pick it up at any time, and if you put this on a coffee table, people are just going to pick it up and look at it, because it's appealing just to do so.
Yes, yeah, no, and that's what I love about it, is it's not like you have to start on page 1 and go to the end.
Right.
It can really be read in any order, and it can be read based on the order of the topic that you're most interested, or the topic that you're grappling with at the moment.
Right.
And it really it's one of the things I look at it as a resource to have. It's not necessarily to be read from front to back, though I do know people who have done that because they just couldn't put it down.
Mm-hmm.
But it also is just great to just have on hand and be ready to answer a question at any time.
Right, and that's something you can certainly do with the book. And friends, it's available at our VCY bookstore and outreach center through this month of May at 50% off. And this is one of those books that I believe is really good for gift giving as well. And whether it be, what a great book even for a Sunday school teacher, a teen Sunday school class, college age, or whatever, to have go through this book as you did with your son, and making sure that they're understanding of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Just a great, but it's very foundational as well for someone says, I know nothing and I need to know something. I get that knock at my door and I'm told about a Watchtower Society. What's this all about? And they can get some of the basic information from your book itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And very helpful.
I agree.
Yeah, great. Friends, just due to time, we're not able to grab any more phone calls here on the broadcast today. But again, A Visual Guide to Biblical Apologetics is really a one-of-a-kind resource for the everyday apologist. That's a subtitle here. Available half off at the VCY bookstore, just $13.49 plus any applicable tax and or shipping. But not only good for yourself, but to share with others as well. And 50% off through May 31st, vcy.com or 1-888-722-4829. That's 1-888-722-4829. Sarah, thank you so much for being on the broadcast today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And really helpful to get that understanding and that easy-to-read format. Thank you so much. And friends, again, you can reach out to the bookstore. It's got so much more than what we even got in on the program today. Different worldviews and apologetics. How does the Bible compare to ancient books? Responding to 5 common objections to the Bible. 15 examples of how archaeology confirms the New Testament. More for the old. So much available. VCY.com. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.